So check this out. Let me set the scene here. E3 2006. A bright-eyed 12-year-old me is sitting at home watching the announcement trailers for the recently named Wii, and I am pretty darn excited.
Reggie was up on stage throwing some tasty names my way. I'm talking Super Mario Galaxy, Zelda Twilight Princess, Metroid Prime 3, WarioWare Smooth Moves, Smash Bros. Brawl, and so much more. That I didn't care about. This is where Ubisoft Paris blew my young, dumb mind by showing off Red Steel, a first-person shoot 'em and or slash 'em up as part of the Wii's launch lineup, but instead of aiming like this, you aimed like this. Well, that's all I needed to see. The future is officially here. Buttons are for chumps. Regular controllers are officially cancelled. Look at that guy. I can be that guy. Some 20-something sitting in his apartment playing Red Steel by himself in the dark. Oh. I read the official Nintendo magazine pretty religiously back then. Every issue that featured a preview for the game just built up my excitement that much more, even back when the console was still codenamed Revolution. This is one of the first games I had become insanely hyped for. I actually remember doing a presentation in my English class about the Wii in the run-up to its release, talking about the different games coming out, the hardware, and how motion controls were going to be a real game changer for the industry, and yeah, I'm pretty sure it went great. O&M had a special Christmas issue for the Wii's launch that I read cover to cover quite a few times in the weeks before I finally got one. It featured previews for big titles coming out in 2007, details about the console and the different channels, as well as in-depth reviews for the different launch titles where they gave Red Steel quite a glowing review of 91%. A quote of theirs even got featured right there in the box, so that was good enough for me. Although wider critical reception at the time seemed to be a pretty mixed bag, I can only assume Ubisoft wrote crude insults on random review copies. Fast forward to Christmas morning and I finally got my hands on it. So after a few obligatory games of Wii Sports Tennis and playing Twilight Princess until I got confused at a wolf section, it was time to take this bad boy for a spin. I started the game up only to find it's great.
Well, that's what I thought at the time anyway, but a 13-year-old me was an idiot. I wouldn't listen to him if I were you. He was almost certainly still buzzing from all the hype.
Yeah, I could have gotten an empty box and I probably still would have thought it was the bee's knees. But that's quite enough about my misspent youth. I've revisited the game 13 years later to find out if it's as good as I remember.
Nope.
So how else are you going to start this action blockbuster than by staring at fish?
Oh, look at these fish, Scott. Aren't they pretty?
That's beautiful dear.
You play as Scott, former bodyguard to your current fiancée, Miyu. He finds himself about to meet Miyu's dad for the first time to get his blessing for the two of them to get married, but before you get the chance to pop the question about popping the question, things take a bit of an unfortunate turn when a group of guys who I'm starting to think might not be waiters start shooting at everyone. So it's up to Scott to save his future father-in-law, Mr. Sato, and try to get him and Miyu to safety by, shooting bad guys, I guess. Everything's looking up for our hero until he remembers that this is still the first mission, so Sato's henchman Ryuichi betrays everyone after being on screen for 54 seconds prior to this by kidnapping her fiancé and her dad, as well as trying to kill our boy Scott, which is a bit of a dick move. You manage to save Sato, but Ryuichi gets away with Miyu, so it's up to Scott to travel to different locations in LA and Tokyo to get your girlfriend back. But it turns out that your future father-in-law is the head of a big Yakuza clan.
Oof. I hate it when that happens.
But it's okay because they're a good organised crime syndicate? I don't know. Scott manages to chase down Ryuichi, who promptly kicks his ass in a sword fight, but spares your life and tells you to bring a sword belonging to Sato's clan to Tokyo, and I'm assuming it's a special sword because it looks fancy and has a name. But, I mean, come on, lots of people name their swords.
Lots of cunts.
Although it is a step up from the sword that you find on the ground of a random floor of an empty hotel after jumping out of an exploding elevator.
Sword? Here? Take it!
Yeah, sure, why not? Sato gives the okay for an outsider of the clan to bring the katana giri to Tokyo and asks you to save his daughter with his dying breath, so, well, now you kinda have to. Scott travels to Japan to meet up with Atori, an old pal of Sato's who teaches you different sword combos in his dojo. He puts you in touch with a guy called Harry, someone who has his ear to the ground organised crime-wise and owns the hippest joint in town. You manage to track down Ryuichi and beat him in a sword fight. Scott's feeling pretty good about this till he realises he's not even halfway through the game, so Ryuichi reveals that he's but a pawn in this grand scheme and that Miyu is being held captive by his boss named Tokai. But right before he reveals his master plan, he gets shot by a ninja.
Oof, I hate it when that happens.
So in order to take this cat down, you're going to need all the help you can get. You have to win the approval of the Sanro Kai, high-ranking people within Sato's clan, by doing missions to help them out while disrupting Tokai's own business ventures in different areas. You can do these levels in whatever order you like, and you can accept missions by nodding or shaking your head using the Wii Remote, because by gosh, it's 2006 and we have to shoehorn this gimmick in anywhere we possibly can. Like with the Wii Remote phone. Now, if anyone's familiar with Red Steel, or even understands the concept of a first-person shooter launch title for the Wii, I know what you're thinking. Well, no, I don't, but I can make an educated guess. Just how bad are the controls? In case you hadn't noticed, there aren't a whole lot of shooters coming out these days with Wii Remote support, so these things didn't quite change the way we play games forever. Yeah, I know, right? So, on a scale from bad to very bad, just how much do the controls for this game suck? Honestly, probably somewhere closer to this end, but with enough practice, after a while it becomes relatively usable. You point at the screen and press B to shoot. You can even twist the Wii Remote and Scott turns his hand in the same way, something that still amuses me more than it should. My god, look at that wrist action.
If you want to play it gangsta style, you can.
The actual aiming isn't that bad. It definitely takes some getting used to and can be a bit awkward and cumbersome, which isn't helped by the fact that the aiming options in the game are really quite limited compared to more recent Wii shooter titles, which offer quite a bit more customization to tailor the controls to your preference, so it's a low, medium or high sensitivity type of job. While the button layout is pretty intuitive, there are quite a few contextual actions done by shaking the nunchuck, reloading, using levers, knifing tables, melee attacks, and opening doors.
So immersive.
Shooters on other consoles can have this too, but the only problem here is that you can't long press shaking your hand, so you can sometimes find yourself opening a door at someone when you're out of bullets. But this wasn't too bad, and it happened a lot less than I thought it would have. By far the biggest issue with the controls is the turning. In busier set pieces, Scott can get riddled with bullets when turning to face a group of enemies, which can cause a lot more deaths and unnecessary frustration. Aiming and shooting at things within the boundaries of the screen is fine when you get the hang of it, but having to aim past the edges of the screen to turn the camera still does feel kind of off, and is a bit too awkward for something that you're going to need to be doing quite a bit. This is also after they had made improvements to the controls from the feedback given by press who played it at E3. I'd be curious to see what they were like before this.
The controllers were a little bit slow, not very responsive.
E3 was for us a stage very important because it was the opportunity for us to get first feedback from players. We worked a lot on the controller aspect since E3.
And while this is a common complaint for any FPS game on the Wii, it's just something that is noticeably worse in Red Steel compared to other games that I've played. Quite possibly because it was one of the first FPS games on the platform. More recent Wii shooters improved on control issues quite a bit, and this is coming from a guy who has more days of playtime on Call of Duty games on the Wii than any reasonable adult ever should. You can zoom in by pressing A and moving the Wii Remote towards the screen. Although I never found myself doing this very much outside of sniping sections, it does help keep your screen centered on an enemy location while still allowing you to aim as normal within the screen. When you pop caps in a sufficient number of asses, doing the same zooming in movement a bit faster activates an ability that lets you freeze time to place shots on heads and crotches at a leisurely pace. Or you can target enemy weapons to disarm groups of opponents and make them surrender with a cheeky little wrist movement. This is also pretty handy when you simply can't be arsed with a gun battle. If you disarm the conveniently labelled leader, everyone drops their guns to go home and rethink their lives. And I love how this ability is taught to you by some random guy in the club in like 2 minutes when he's all like,
Did you know ninjas could slow down time? Turns out you just have to breathe. Fuck me, right? Now shoot the janitor.
You can also do target practice with this guy to unlock guns that you can equip for different missions, and this is right when you get into a routine for a while. Complete a mission, learn a new sword combo, unlock new weapons for your armory, beat a mission, study the blade, new gun, so on and so forth. Now the sword fighting.
In a word, it sucks. In 2 words, it sucks ass.
it slows the pace of the game down to a crawl. During gameplay, the transition from shooting into a sword fight is nowhere near as fluid as it was made out to be in earlier trailers. You'll find yourself shooting your way through a level when all of a sudden Scott's spidey senses kick in and he takes his sword out before anyone else with a sword even shows up. You attack by swinging the Wii remote. Whichever direction you swing, Scott swings his sword the same way. In theory anyway, it's not the most precise. You can dodge enemy attacks by sidestepping or parry their swing by swinging the nunchuck. Time it right and it throws them off balance, allowing you to get a few hits in before they recover. And some enemies do heavy attacks that you can't block and have to dodge to avoid. It's pretty simple. Early in the game, you can just flail the Wii remote wildly to win these fights fairly easily, but eventually enemies block pretty much all of your swings, and this is where you need to deploy some basic strategy with the moving and dodging. Around this point in the game, I don't like the way that my actions in the sword fights can only be reactive to what the enemy does. You circle each other till they attack, time the parry right to knock them off balance, which allows you to get a few hits in before they get their shit together, then rinse and repeat. It gets pretty mind-numbing after a while, and since the scripted sword fights basically replace boss fights, along with several more thrown into each level, I got sick of them rather quickly. Then there's times where you feel like you have some momentum during the fight while getting hits in, but you get too close to a wall and the duel stops so that you can both shuffle back into the middle of the area, something that always happens at the most inopportune moments. This gets particularly frustrating later in the game when you can only get 1 or 2 hits on someone before they recover. This is where the sword techniques called katas come in handy, basically swing combos that you can learn after each mission. I use some of the easier to do moves throughout the game, but the better, longer combos I really had trouble with. As I said before, the Wii Remote Nunchuck can't detect my swings that well, which doesn't help combos of chaining together swings in certain directions. I actually managed to do 1 or 2 completely by accident in a fight, but others took me forever to do, even in the tutorial. This is actual footage of me really trying my best to do this move 3 times just so I could move on to the next level. Red Steel also has a sort of moral choice system in these sword fights. After beating your opponent, you have to decide whether to kill them or spare their life. And I say sort of because unlike other games, these choices didn't seem to have any sort of impact, as far as I could tell anyway. That is, right up until the very end of the game, but we'll get onto that later. Kill them by swinging the Wii remote to finish them off, or swing the nunchuck to put your sword away and spare their life. And rather impressively, both of these options are equally unsatisfying. If you choose to kill them, you don't even get a cool looking animation or anything, you just sort of bonk them on the head. And if you choose to let them live, they just grovel at your feet for a few seconds, then disappear into the ether. The only meaningful difference that I could tell between the two is that you get respect points for sparing people, which gives you a better grade at the end of a mission, so there's really no point in killing anyone at all. It's not really much of a choice if you ask me, you might as well go for the less shitty option. So after doing several of these missions and taking back territory for the Yakuza clan that you've basically joined, you get the bright idea to hide the sword that the bad guys have been trying to steal from you instead of carrying it around everywhere. Scott, you idiot! Hattori kindly and conveniently offers to let you hide the katana giri at his dojo right before you get captured by Tokai. Scott takes a beat down and Tokai gives a rather enjoyable villain speech complete with an evil laugh.
Maybe I should keep her for me.
But in this game of wits, naturally our boy comes out on top when he devises an ingenious plan to escape after he's left alone in a room completely unattended where he isn't restrained or bound in any way, shape or form. Scott makes his way to Harry's office where he, does that, and reveals that it was in fact him who sold you out to Tokai. Get into a sword fight, snitches get stitches, and you're told that Tokai is going after the sword that you left at Hattori's dojo like 10 minutes ago. Yeah, I think they might have found it. You fight off some waves of Foot Clan soldiers from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the sword is stolen, Hattori's daughter Mariko is poisoned, and members of the Sanrokai are kidnapped. Oh, sugar. It's not too bad though, you rescue these guys literally the very next mission and get the sword back, but unfortunately Tokai escapes while you have to fight a ninja with a muffly voice.
Got close to this girl Mariko, didn't you? A mistake. I'm sorry, could you say that again? I didn't quite catch that.
Turns out Tokai's dad was a member of Sato's clan until his membership was suddenly revoked when Hattori cut his head off with the katana giri. Tokai wants to use the sword for revenge on the people who killed his father.
Cool motive, still murder.
Understandably, Hattori's pretty cheesed off about that time his daughter got poisoned, so the two of you roll up to Tokai's crib to split up and search for clues. And this guy goes full on Terminator. I should just sit back and let him do everything. Just look at him go.
A poisoned blade.
Well, he had a good run. Here it is, the final showdown in Tokai's back garden. One quick sword fight later, and he informs you that he is the only one who has the antidote for Mariko and Hattori. It's here that you're faced with the only meaningful choice of the game, whether to stop Hattori from killing Tokai. I let him do his thing to see what happens. He kills the guy, breaks the sword, he and his daughter die, while our boys Scott and Miyu blow that popsicle stand and live miserably ever after. Possibly, I can only guess, that was clearly the bad ending. Let's just replay the final level. Okay, you intervene this time, fight Hattori, break his sword in the final battle, and...
Huh.
So, apparently, to see the other ending, you have to play through the whole game again. Antidotes all round, nobody dies, and Scott has taught everyone a valuable lesson about forgiveness. Hooray! God bless us, everyone. So that's Red Steel. The story is, well, pretty bad. It's rather cliche and not very engaging, but some moments are just so over the top and just straight up ridiculous that I can't quite tell if it was supposed to be taken seriously or not. Parts of it are almost like a B-movie, not that one, which would be understandable to be this cheesy and extravagant, but the fact that I can't really tell means it's probably just a bit shit. Red Steel ain't no looker either. Yeah, it was a launch title for the Wii, so I wasn't expecting much, although there are some pretty fancy lighting effects going on, by 2006 Wii standards anyway. And some of the environments in the different levels do look rather nice, as long as you don't look too close. The game just has its fair share of really dodgy looking textures, and some of the character models are downright laughable. I guess the pattern of Ubisoft graphical downgrades from E3 trailers goes back further than I thought. The cutscenes are fine. They opted for a sort of comic book style that works alright, I guess, although it's probably a better choice than using in-engine footage for them, so it's alright by me. One of my biggest gripes with the game is that it just feels empty. You wouldn't think that you're playing in one of the most populated cities on the planet. Everywhere's pretty much deserted except for enemies and a handful of NPCs for the whole game.
Hey man, when they told me I'd see some action in this place, I thought they just meant with the girls.
I thought the voice acting was pretty good for the most part, but it was ruined by some truly, amazingly awful dialogue.
Thank you so much, sir. If you wouldn't have been here, I'd be mixing drinks in heaven now.
I mean, what human speaks like this? Seriously.
I work as a bartender, therefore that is the all-encompassing facet of my personality. Yes.
One of my favourite things about the game is actually the soundtrack. It spans different genres from serene, relaxing, traditional Japanese music that really adds to the atmosphere of certain levels, and even has some lively J-pop tracks that kick in during busy gunfights. There's a lot of great tracks on it, and it suits the game nicely. I think variety in the setting of the levels is one of Red Steel's strong points. Each mission has its own distinct look and feel to it, and while some are more forgettable than others, they never felt the same. You go from shooting up saunas, fish markets, a rooftop garden, a burning dojo, a car wash, the lobby scene from The Matrix, and my personal favourite, the arcade level that goes pretty balls to the wall. You fight henchmen in cosplay, dinosaurs, a shootout in complete darkness except for enemies with glow-in-the-dark masks, roller coaster rides rigged with explosives, and fighting Power Rangers in sword fights. This was definitely the most memorable part of the game for me, and was a really fun mission overall. I encountered a few glitches during my playthrough. Most were pretty harmless or even funny, although there was one annoying bug where a scripted conversation wouldn't activate when it was supposed to after clearing a group of bad guys, so I had to blow myself up a couple of times to get it to work. There's also a local multiplayer mode thrown in there as well, which is nice to have, I guess. Up to 4 players in split screen with 4 maps and 3 modes, nothing groundbreaking. You got kill everyone in teams, and this other game mode where each player puts their ear to the Wii Remote speaker and are given an objective to complete, usually instructing you to target one of the other players. This was definitely the most unique of the 3, though I've only ever played it once or twice as it requires 4 players, so apparently I need some, whatever the hell these things are. It's alright for what it is. Revisiting it, I wanted to see if I could get the glitch I remembered, where if you die holding a grenade, sometimes you would respawn with a weird claw hand. So that's pretty neat. There's also one of the maps that you could easily jump out of into a black hole sort of thing. Back in the day I used to call it going into hyperspace, though I don't really know why. Oh yeah. Overall, a great soundtrack and the occasional cool level isn't quite enough to save what I thought to be a rather mundane experience for the most part. The story wasn't very engaging, the world felt empty, and the characters that did populate it were forgettable. This would be a whole lot easier to look past if the gameplay was on point. And while there were sections of the game where I had a lot of fun, there was just too many frustrating moments in between to make it worthwhile. The game had some interesting ideas, but failed to really deliver on anything in a meaningful way. Combining shooting and sword fighting mechanics sounds great on paper, hell it even looked great in the trailers, but there wasn't really any synergy between them in the game. I found myself rolling my eyes anytime someone with a sword appeared on screen. Red Steel, along with other FPS titles in the early days of the Wii, suffers from awkward controls that you'll be wrestling with more than the enemies. I also think that the sword fighting was a bit too ambitious for the capabilities of the Wii Remote at the time. And this is something that the sequel promised to improve on greatly with the implementation of Wii Motion Plus. Yes, you heard right, the game I've been talking smack about for the entire video sold like 1 million copies, which is apparently good enough for a sequel to get the green light, with Red Steel 2 launching in March of 2010. And it's a sequel in the sense that the game is called Red Steel 2, it's got absolutely nothing to do with this one, it's a brand new setting, characters, even art style with a cel-shaded western aesthetic. A sequel that, from what I hear, is actually really good, and I'd definitely be interested in checking it out sometime. Red Steel 1, on the other hand, seems to have aged about as well as I have. The game just seems to be full of wasted potential. The unique setting and characters that could have been possible in taking on the Yakuza in Tokyo. A combat system with action-packed gun battles as well as intense sword duels. Instead, we got Wii Remote phones and shootouts with guys in dinosaur costumes. Okay, that actually sounds pretty cool. And I think that's the trick to it. If you manage to turn your brain off and try your best to tolerate the controls, you might find yourself having fun every once in a while. Just not that much fun.